Okay, well, thank you all for joining us at this meeting this evening. As you just heard from the electronic voice, we are recording the meeting, and the hope is to post them up on the DallasZoningReform.com website. I'm sure some of the panelists here with me will kind of constantly be entering in that website for you so that you can visit it, find the materials, provide comments. Just a little bit of housekeeping right now and the logistics of how this meeting is going to go. This is the same presentation that we gave at the in-person meetings back in June. You'll see it's the same PowerPoint. It even has the date of June 2025. And this PowerPoint is available on the project website for you to download as a PDF. How this is going to run, we're going to do the presentation. It's similar to the in-person meetings. We'll be doing the full presentation and then following that up with a Q&A. During the presentation, we ask you don't raise your hands or you're free to participate in the chat. We'll do the hand raising and do the questions after the presentation is done. So as soon as we finish up and I kind of close this out, feel free to raise your hands. If you're familiar with how Zoom webinar works, you probably all realized you're muted. So we will, as we get questions, unmute you, have you ask your question, and then lower your hand and just proceed as quickly as you can raise your hand. We'll come to your questions. As in any Q&A, any public discussion, please keep in mind, Dallas is a big city, a lot of people, a lot of different places, a lot of different opinions. So we do ask that both in the chat as well as when you're answering questions or providing a comment at the end of the presentation to really please be respectful. We also want to make sure we're reserving the chat on this primarily for comments. As we said, we want to do the Q&A with the raised hands, allowing you to talk and present your opinion. So, within the chat, we'll probably miss a question during the presentation if you're throwing them in there. If we get to the end of the raised hands, when we get to the end of this, we'll kind of open up the chat and see if there's some questions at the end that you would like to put into the chat. But we'll let you know when that kind of part of the process opens up. Just please be advised, the chat is something we're taking as kind of meeting notes for us. It's not the official written record. I think it's important, and we've articulated this a number of times, we really need to receive written comments to hear your thoughts, your opinions on what we're proposing within this code diagnostic. Number of different ways to provide those. DallasZoningReform.com has a comment form that you can enter your comment into. It also provides an email, so if you're more comfortable sending by email, please go ahead and do that. That button's on that website as well. And if you just want to walk over some comments down to City Hall, that is great too. It's really important for us to get written comments and create the record of comments of written comments so that we're very clear in what you are articulating to us. We want to make sure that it doesn't get lost in these discussions. Kind of what goes on in meetings are a little bit more nebulous. So we want to make sure we really have your thoughts down the way you want to present them. So we can't emphasize enough how important obtaining these written comments are. Again, we'll put the website address up into the chat probably a couple of times. And so with that, I think I covered all the housekeeping issues that we need to go over, and we're going to dive right into the presentation. And then, like I said, we'll open it up for Q&A. So again, good morning, good evening, everybody. Thank you for making the time to come to the Zoom meeting on the Code Diagnostic. Like I said, this is what we've been presenting since June, and we're happy to be able to do this for folks that maybe couldn't get there in person or couldn't stay for the whole meeting to provide these opportunities from the air-conditioned comfort of your home, because it was a little bit steamy in those rooms when we were there in June. Okay. So, as you know, this is the Dallas zoning reform. We have these taglines: simple, clear, future ready. And what these really mean is simple. We want streamlined regulations that reduce unnecessary complexity. We want clear rules that are understood by everybody and not just specialists. and future ready, designed for the Dallas we're becoming, not the Dallas of yesterday. And a lot of folks have asked questions about that last one, who's making this decision. Really, what we're taking direction from is adopted plans and policies of the city, in particular Forward Dallas, the recently adopted comprehensive plan. Because zoning regulations really do have to follow the policies articulated within major plans like that, such as Forward Dallas. So what are the objectives? Kind of just said everything on this first point, but really we're looking at Forward Dallas, your recently adopted comprehensive plan. And a comprehensive plan is just that, it's comprehensive. There's a lot in there. Zoning codes don't implement everything that's within a comprehensive plan. We're really looking towards the land use and development aspects of that. There's a lot in there that needs other forms of support through other different plans, policies, different types of codes outside of zoning that may be needed, but we're doing kind of our part on the Forward Dallas end to help implement the policies and goals within that. We want a code that everybody can kind of pick up and read, that it's user-friendly, it's predictable, it's consistent in its application. We're looking to create new opportunities for diverse and affordable housing. So really, and building upon that as we grow, we want to make sure we're doing it in a responsible, sustainable, and resilient way. We want to integrate design standards into the districts to make sure that the high quality Dallas is receiving the high quality development as new things pop up. Reduce dependence on special approvals, in particular for things that kind of everybody wants and that everybody likes and wants to see. And then increase the transparency of development approvals, make it clear how these different processes work. In particular, I'm the applicant, I know what I can do, I'm a concerned neighbor, I know exactly what this application means, and I am the boards and elected officials processing these, and I know the exact process and the kind of guidelines of approval or denial, whichever case, that they're focused upon. So what is this? This is the Code Diagnostic. And how did we get to this point? So there's been a couple of steps here. The first and foremost is the Camiros team that's on here. That would be myself, Chris, and Mitch, if you're at the meetings. Same guys are here again tonight. Did a lot of studying of the current regulations, really diving into it, reading the whole very big book and coming to an understanding of what the regulations are and trying to understand how they work. We had some stakeholder meetings. These are individual one-on-one listening sessions that we did with various technicians that work with the code, just to understand how somebody that works with the code kind of picks it up and uses it, and what works, what doesn't work, kind of just their opinions on that. And then again, kind of equal importance, we had a number of discussions with staff who work with the code on a daily basis to really understand what's going on with the code, how it's being applied, what's missing, what works well, kind of all these different aspects. So it's just really a lot of analysis went into this code diagnostic. So what does this present? This is a proposal. What we're here to do is identify some of the current issues with the code, looking at ways that best practices in zoning can be implemented in this code as well, assessing some of the most common special approvals that happen, and then trying to present some concepts and regulatory approaches that set the stage for code drafting. So the purpose of these meetings is really to gather feedback on some of these proposals that we've put forward within the Code Diagnostic. We want to hear from you. And again, just to emphasize, it's very important for us to get written comments from you so we understand exactly what you want to tell us. So it's important to note too, this code diagnostic is not going to be revised, as it is conceptual. It is a series of approaches. So we're trying to get some discussion going, understand things that, what's working, what's not working, is there anything that we've missed? How are some of our proposals being received? So again, this is not a document that's going to be modified, but it is something that's giving us a lot of good feedback over the course of these meetings. So organization. Kind of fundamentally, what we want to do is create a code that's easy to find what you're looking for and understand how these things are going to work. So I think one of the most important things is to create a new graphic orientation. Lots of folks, can read the text and sometimes it seems just hard to understand. Graphics can help explain that. There's visual learners, there's technical learners. We want to make sure the code's got something for everybody. We want to define all the terms in the code. I think that's very important because it reduces interpretation. If everybody knows what something means and how it's applied, It makes things far more consistent and predictable. We want to look at the measurement methodologies and make sure we're measuring things all in the same way throughout the city. Common example, building height. Let's make sure we're measuring building height exactly the same way throughout the whole document. A consistent voice. The current code is over 40 years old. This means that lots of people have made lots of different amendments and they come from different backgrounds. They may be engineers, they may be lawyers, they may just be staff, they may be elected officials. And we want to make sure now, as we have the opportunity to do this reform and do this rewrite, that we can apply a consistent voice throughout the document. All the same terms are used, everything is kind of referenced the same, making sure that we've got that understanding that runs throughout the document as a whole. Again, that consistent voice. And then compartmentalization. This is really a organization technique where we're just grouping like with like. We're creating logical compartments where we group things together in a regulatory category that's the same. So you'll see things here like a chapter for parking or a chapter for the residential districts. So everything kind of sits within their logical home. You can see an example of kind of what we've proposed as this initial organization here with the 21 articles in that to the side. If you take a look at the code diagnostic, it goes into a little bit more detail there. And as part of this reform, we've decided to create a new Chapter 63. And what this does is really brings together the zoning and the subdivision regulations. A lot of questions. Why Chapter 63? Very easy answer. It is the last open chapter in the municipal code. So we just have to, you've got a Chapter 62 and 63 is now available. So we're jumping in there. Rather than doing, say, you're probably familiar, there's 51, 51A. We didn't want to do 51B. As part of our process, there are a few things that will remain in Chapter 51A, the current development code that applies. These are things like parkland dedication, floodplain, historic preservation, gas drilling and production. All of these will remain in Chapter 51A. They're not within the scope of this project to conduct any updates to these sections. So the first big category, uses. One of the things we want to create here is a global use matrix. This is a great way to organize the use structure of the code. It really provides you two ways to see how uses are allowed. So either I have a piece of property in a certain district, I can look down that table and I can see the exact type of uses that would pop up there. Or I want to open a business. So basically I find my use and I go across the table and I see which districts would allow it. Again, I've said this many times, this matrix right here is an example from another community, Hot Springs, Arkansas. So don't think that we've made a table for Dallas yet. This is really what's in, this is just an example of an existing table in another code. This is great because doing it this way, you've got one place where all the uses are. So inconsistencies are eliminated. If you want to add something or you want to modify a use, you've just got one table to go to, and it makes it much easier to make sure that you're not creating anything that would create those types of inconsistencies. It would list all the principal and accessory uses. And most importantly, in that column of uses that you see, every single one of those would have a definition attached to it. So again, that reduction in interpretation that we're seeking. In some cases, you see there just in this example table that there's certain use standards that are referenced. And these are standards that go around uses to prevent negative impacts on adjacent properties. For example, a car wash may have something like buffering requirements around the lot lines that meet other uses. Just because of the nature of a car wash. So we're really just trying to make sure that we're regulating those negative impacts. We also want to look at how uses are approved. You have currently the specific use permit or the SUP. This is common. We see this in codes everywhere. And it's a good way to deal with uses that could be appropriate for a district, but really do need a second look. So we want to make sure that we maintain those. Other types of use permissions, you've got a bunch of them in there that look at things like L, limited uses, DIR, development impact review uses, RAR, residential adjacency review uses, and they're just creating these additional processes that much of which can be handled by creating a better set of use standards for a variety of uses. So it's really looking at building in conditions that are frequent to things like this and just making them either SUPs or permitted uses with conditions, whichever one is more appropriate. So basically we're keeping the intent, but we're not creating a kind of complex system of how things can be approved. One thing we noticed as we were looking through the code was looking that specific use permits are currently subject to renewal. This is a very uncommon standard. We haven't really seen this anywhere else. And our recommendation, the proposal is to eliminate this. It really creates a better sense of predictability rather than having the renewal in place. So if I want to open a business and it's a SUP and I see, oh, wait, but I don't know if in a year from now, 2 years from now, I'm going to be able to keep going, it can discourage businesses that you do want to see. Now, we understand the SUP has been used, through our meetings and discussions to treat some very contentious uses. Those are on our radar. We're continuing to look at those and find ways to deal with that. But that is something that we want to be clear we do have on our radar right now. Dallas is a great city. We want to make sure that it continues to be creative and vibrant. So you see there some of the new uses that we wanted to add. Things like artisan workshops, food truck parks, specialty food service, which is things like coffee roasters, commercial kitchens, just making sure that the code is inviting to these types of uses that would be appropriate in certain areas. You see there the corner stores. There's a big discussion within the Code Diagnostic about these. And what these are intending to do is acknowledge existing corner stores that may be in residential districts. The intent there being that, they're non-conforming, but they're continuing to operate and they can provide some good local services to folks. So our proposal is to find a way to allow these to continue and take them out of non-conforming status. With a whole set of standards around them to protect the adjacent uses from any kind of negative impacts. It's important to note that we're looking at this as a use. So this would be a use potentially allowed within a residential district. And so it's not subject. I know there's been some fear regarding the state statute about commercial districts and allowing for, commercial and mixed use together and multifamily, I'm sorry. This would not be subject to that. It would be a use that sits within those. So again, a lot of standards built around that for protection. So the heart of the beast, the districts and what we want to do with the districts. So quick overview. In some cases, we're looking at the current single family districts and seeing ways to make sure that they're addressing what they need to and increasing conformance in terms of lot size. There's proposals in there for a set of gentle density residential districts, again, for those opportunities for housing diversity. Refining the multifamily and the townhouse districts so they function a little bit better. Creating a set of commercial and mixed use districts that increase in scale and function so we can design from the local level to the regional. Integrating mixed use development into the commercial districts. Some of you are aware, just kind of referenced it. The state has stepped in and made sure that we're in any commercial areas that, there's allowances for mixed use and residential. So kind of work's been done for us a little bit in that range. Making sure the range of industrial districts is appropriate, and then ensuring special purpose and overlay districts continue to address the specific needs that they're targeted at. So first up was the single family residential analysis. And what we looked at here was really the development patterns. This was a technical exercise in which we looked at the lot sizes that are on the ground within each of these residential districts to see if the minimum lot size required by the district actually matches the development pattern. So what we found here is in certain ones like the R1 acre district, so it's a 1 acre lot size, 43,560 square feet. That generally it's working, but if we can reduce it to a builder's acre of 40,000 square feet, which is what that kind of round number of 40,000 is called, we can actually increase compliance in those areas. As we took a look at the half acre district, much of these are meeting the development patterns that are in place. So that's why you see things here like maintain. Similar maintain is the R75 and the R5. The district standards seem to be matching the on the ground patterns that we see in these areas. And then we took a look at R16 through R10. And again, these are kind of some of the smaller areas of single family residential lots, in particular 16 and 13, which is 16,000 square feet, 13,000 square feet. And as we looked at this, there is the potential here to consolidate all three of them into one district of a 10,000 square foot lot size to increase the compliance of the lots that are located there. And again, just speaking of this, this is a technical exercise. We were just looking at the data of development patterns and how things matched up with what's required by the code. As we looked at the residential district structure, we thought of, and kind of looking at the policies of housing diversity, we thought about a couple of potential new districts. The first would be the R3 single family residential district. This would be a new 3,000 square foot minimum lot size intended for the small lot urban residential market. Even as we looked throughout the city, this type of development pattern isn't new. There's 2,000 properties that are currently of this lot size within the single family areas. So this isn't a development pattern that would be totally new to Dallas. Then we also want to create a new set of gentle density residential districts. These would be ones that allow for everything from single family to duplex, triplex, quadruplex. So it's that kind of idea of promoting infill development, housing supply, and diversity in residential dwellings. I've said this in the other meetings that these are parallel. That is not a term of art. That was just me trying to be clever in phrasing, but these would be a brand new set of districts that we would incorporate into the code. So that you've got the tools in the toolkit for when areas are ready to transition into these types of districts. You've got everything already in the code. So you don't have to come up with something on the fly. You don't have to make new standards. You've got something ready for those areas. Now, to be very clear, we don't know where those areas are. We are not on the zoning map yet. What we're trying to do within this is focus on the text and get all of the tools in the toolkit that we need. So we don't have areas where we're looking at that these would be put down at this point in time. So again, we're just kind of focusing on getting what we need into this code so that you don't have to rely on things like PD in order to move forward. We took a look at the townhouse and the multifamily districts. We think there's opportunities here to streamline these, kind of clarify them. You've got 3 townhouse districts with really identical use permissions and dimensional requirements. There's some density limit variability between them. 6, 9, and 12 dwelling units per acre. We believe that this can be consolidated into one townhouse district, simplifying the controls, looking at things like minimum lot area per dwelling unit to create a truly functional, proper townhouse district. Multifamily districts, right now you've got 4 of them. Kind of looking at them, it may be that the base standards for these are too low. There seems to be a reliance on the affordable mixed income bonus for project feasibility. So we need to kind of take a good look at what goes on within these. MF1 and MF2, the current districts, pretty similar. And then again, kind of the next category, MF3, MF4, higher density stuff. Again, very similar. So we think there's an ability to consolidate MF1 and MF2 as a lower scale, lower density multifamily district, and MF3 and MF4 to create that higher density tier that would maybe have a bit more control on form and scale in the development allowed. You currently do have a mixed income bonus. We haven't made any proposals to get rid of that. We think it's a good thing and that it should be maintained. For the commercial districts, we want to create a whole set of commercial and mixed use districts with a logical increase in scale and function. So it's really just refining these. And again, working with kind of the state legislation that's coming through. You've currently got office districts. These current ones really reserve the uses allowed to just office. We've seen over time less and less of a need for these. I think we've all lived through the pandemic and we saw how workplaces have changed. The demand for a lot of office space is not necessarily that big right now, at least, or into the foreseeable future. So really, we think that these can be handled within the other commercial and mixed use districts. So not to say you can't just build an office building that's just office use in any of these other commercial districts. We're just not reserving a district specifically limiting the uses to office. The NS and the CR district, this is neighborhood and community, more local, smaller in scale. Want to make sure that we're allowing for proper mixed use development, but we're addressing the scale of those types of developments. the RR district, which is the regional retail. We want to make sure we maintain orientation as an auto-centric, large-scale commercial area. You need a place for car dealerships, for IKEA, for Costco. And so we want to make sure we've got a district that addresses the particular siting standards in particular of these types of uses. Your current mixed-use districts have some strange limitations on the number of the percentages of uses allowed within, kind of each development. That's really not flexible. We want mixed use areas to develop naturally. So again, it's just kind of making sure that they're working the way that they should be. And then kind of a subcategory of mixed use is a specific type called TOD, transit oriented development. And so we want to create a series of TOD districts that are oriented towards transit use. They highlight the transit that's available. But we understand in a city the size of Dallas, all TOD districts are not the same. There's different scales to areas. There's different levels of, transit uses to, these various station areas. So we want to make sure that as we're doing that, we're creating a series of TOD districts that can really fit in with the surrounding context. And then finally, in the commercial, the central area districts, the central business district, we want to make sure that we're highlighting, kind of the center of town where the biggest development occurs, the downtown core where things are very tall and big and vibrant. And then transitioning out, as you can see here, we talk about sub-districts to the CBD outer core. So it's kind of scaling down, feathering out from that interior core of the central business district. And then further, kind of moving further away from that, even looking at things like, the central business district residential mixed use, which would again be another kind of scaling, feathering out from that preliminary core. None of this is done in a perfect circle. It would be great if it was, because it'd be very easy. But really, you can kind of think of it as just gradations coming out from that central point. Some additional changes to the commercial and mixed use districts. You have these urban corridor districts, very complex, but they're not even on the map. So with the new structure, we're recommending elimination. You also have these multiple commercial districts, and these are a little bit strange because their requirements, again, percentage requirements within a single development of the types of commercial uses that need to be in there. It's a very outdated control. And so we want to make sure that we can integrate these into the new district structure and make things a bit more flexible. And then finally, you have the form-based districts, which is kind of a whole separate code within the code that have all kinds of different standards tied to it. In the idea of consistency, as you heard me say, kind of working on building up design within the other districts of the code, we want to make sure that we think we can take what's good of the form-based districts and distribute it throughout the other districts of the code so that everything's consistently getting that high level of design that's matching the scale and the context. So with that happening, I really think that we can move away from these form-based districts and use this new commercial district structure to address those areas. The industrial districts, we want to make sure we create a kind of a predictable development environment for industry as well as the adjacent areas. So first up, we've proposed the RL Research and Logistics District. This would combine the current IL light industrial with the current IR industrial research to create this new district. Really targeted for large scale office and research campuses, some light industrial, some logistics activities. So kind of really that stuff that doesn't really have a kind of outside impacts like the general industrial district would. This would be a renaming of the IM Industrial Manufacturing District. The GI district here is really intended to accommodate those uses that are very much impactful. And so looking at making sure this district is addressing all the issues that come up with things like that. We've proposed a new flex commercial district. This is for those unique areas that were kind of industrial in their origin, but over time have started to blend with other uses. We always say the example, this is where you see your microbrewery, you see your doggy daycare, you see your indoor soccer starting to mix with some, small scale industrial or warehousing. And it creates these kind of cool, unique environments. And so we want to make sure that we've got a district in place to address this type of development. And then finally, the business industrial district. This is a renaming of the commercial service district to make sure that it's clear that this is somewhat industrial in nature, distinguishing it from the commercial. There's a range of uses allowed within here, some of which are industrial. So we want to make sure that we're accurately reflecting exactly what it is. Your special purpose and overlay districts. So this is kind of the last set of districts in the code. Special purpose districts, there's a number you have now that do work towards their goal, which is kind of targeted at specific uses or specific development patterns. These are the agricultural district, the manufactured home district, and the CD conservation district. So we've recommended maintaining these. Couple of new ones. One would be an open space district, really targeting larger parks, areas of natural resources, a district that kind of envelops them and protects them. That's not to say parks wouldn't be allowed anywhere. We don't want to do that. We want to allow for parks to happen anywhere. But this would be a means for these larger areas that are of this type of use. And then the institutional district. You currently have the ID overlay, the institutional overlay. This would convert it into a base district. The institutional district would be able to deal with these larger campus developments of things like government facilities, educational facilities, hospital facilities, and deal with kind of the sensitivities around the edges with a bit more flexibility in the internal part of the campus, kind of where it's kind of self-contained. So that's kind of what we're looking to do with that district. You have a number of current overlays, everything from historic to Turtle Creek to neighborhood stabilization. Again, we've made the recommendation to maintain these. There's a PM parking management district, again, kind of tied, I believe, to the form-based districts. And as we integrate those and as you've gotten your new parking reform, we don't think there's much of a need for this district, this overlay. And then one of the things we've heard a lot of opinions about, your current ADU overlay. And as you can see in the Code Diagnostic, we've made a proposal to consider allowing ADUs more broadly as a use within the districts. There would be significant standards placed upon them, thresholds you have to meet in order to be able to even get one. But really what we're looking to do is, again, that housing diversity, to look at how ADUs can assist in that. And then these last ones, these legacy districts, these are districts that we just have to keep on the books. Right now, you can't apply for them. Going into the future, you can't apply for them, but they're out there, so we just need to keep track of them. And so we would maintain these 3 legacy districts. But again, you can't use them now, you can't use them in the future, but we just need to know what those regulations are so we don't lose them. So what are we proposing more generally in terms of updating the zoning district controls? One of the key things here is to create the distinction between yard and setback. A required setback is the minimum dimension set by the code that something has to be set back. So, and then the yard is the area between the actual building wall and that appropriate lot line. So if I set my building back from my front lot line, it says 20 feet is the minimum required, but I set it 30 feet. My setback is 20 feet. My yard is 30 feet. And it's important because there's certain things we want to control that may go on, for example, in front of the house. If we only control by setback, if I push my house further back than that dimension requires, technically I could do things in that no man's land of between the setback line and the building line, that yard area. So, we want to make sure nobody can put, for example, a swimming pool in front of the house. So that's what's important about this distinction. Seems minor, but it controls a lot within a code. We want to make sure that the setback requirements are clear: interior side, the rear, the corner side setback. So these are all defined. The numbers are clear on what's required. And then we've proposed to regulate the front setback, in particular in the single family districts, by an averaging provision. And what this does is help to match the existing pattern of development along the block face. So when a new house comes in, it's matching the setbacks of everything along the block. Now, there's a few things you can add as safeguards if, say, somebody's set back really far or somebody's set back really close. But in general, the way that this works is really to help maintain the kind of natural rhythm of the way a block looks, in particular when new things come in. We also want to clarify the controls on building coverage, as well as creating a new impervious surface maximum. So building coverage would be the principal building and any accessory structures, like say a detached garage. The impervious surface controls the paving over the lot. So that's important to help regulate some of the stormwater issues that may emerge. If a lot is fully paved, the water has nowhere to go except onto your neighbor's lot. So we want to make sure that there's areas available for absorption. As we continue to look through kind of the district controls, we want to make it clear building height comes up again and again, that we're measuring building height in feet, not in stories. So that we're really clear buildings can only be X amount of feet tall. So we're clear on what these heights are. We want to, again, we kind of mentioned it, I mentioned it already within the multifamily districts, but we want to make sure that we're evaluating the building heights for multifamily and non-residential districts, making sure that they're allowing for the appropriate type of development. And something we've heard a lot of feedback on, the residential proximity slope, or the RPS. We think, and we've proposed, that there may be some better ways to control these transitions. We don't have the technical language ready yet. We're still working and kind of evaluating how to do this. But there's a number of different ways rather than the complicated math that goes along with the RPS to really address the issues of, in particular, taller buildings going next door to single family. So there's a lot of ways that we can really make sure that in those areas of transition, that we're addressing anything that would kind of impose upon the lower scale, lower density development. So we want to keep its intent, keep what it's trying to control, but do it in a better way. We want to look at controlling how development happens, residential in particular, by lot area, per dwelling unit rather than dwelling units per acre, so that it's more clear kind of how things would develop. Eliminating FAR. FAR is kind of losing favor. It's really intended and was created particularly for skyscrapers. And so as we look at things like building coverage, impervious surface, we address heights, we address setbacks, we look at all these different things. We think there's a lot of different ways to control the volume without having to resort to the FAR control. And then I've said this before, design standards, integrating those into most of the districts so that good design is coming. Design is not just good looking buildings, but buildings that are compatible with their neighbors. We don't want to get into architecture, but we do want to make sure that the good bones of a building are required within the code. So we made it through the biggest part of it. So now we'll go kind of through everything else that's part of this code. So general development standards. A lot of these is kind of after we move away from the principal building on a lot, just examples of, I've listed some examples here, but just things that kind of function as to how other things can be organized on a lot. We want to make sure that site triangle requirements are clear. So this is really at a corner, making sure nothing's obstructing the view of a pedestrian walking down the sidewalk and the car that's coming down the street. So at that corner, they can see each other and we don't have any kind of tragic accidents. How our fence is controlled. What do we do with mechanical equipment, such as HVAC? Refuse containers or dumpsters in particular, how we control those. So making sure those are all clearly stated within the code. Exterior lighting controls are also something we've proposed to add. Exterior lighting would be kind of a simple way to try to control some of the light glare and trespass and light pollution that can happen when lighting just really doesn't have any controls around it. So we want to make something simple that everybody can understand and it's easy to enforce. And then address the variety of accessory structures. There's general standards that apply, but then some of them need some specifics, things like garages, sheds, apiaries, solar and wind panels on somebody's home. So making sure that we've got those specific standards in place for those as well. So everybody understands exactly how, these can go, where they can go on my lot, how big they can be, how do I install them. As part of this, this kind of goes back to the yard setback discussion that I just talked about. Key things of permitted encroachments into required setbacks. Again, this is an example table. This is not for Dallas. This is just one of the clearest looking ones that I had on hand. That shows kind of what types of architectural features can encroach for a certain amount into a required setback. So you'll see in this table, it says yes, it says no. Some cases, we don't want it to encroach into that required setback. In other cases, we do want to allow it. But then you see here as well, there's limitations on that of how much it can encroach, how much it can go into that setback. just so we can be, we can allow for these features to happen on homes. If you don't allow for these encroachments, homes need to push back in order to accommodate them, and generally you'll start losing these architectural features. So we want to make sure if somebody's doing a nice bay window, they've got some leeway there to do it. They add a lot of, architectural interest to building facades. They make things look nice, and so we want to make sure there's allowances in place for that. Parking and landscape. Well, you all have just been through a very large parking reform. And congratulations on getting that adopted. So what we'll be doing on our end, we're basically just making sure it's aligning with the rest of the code. So essentially kind of building it into the structure and making sure it's referencing the right districts and the right uses. And so we've got everything kind of put together in that parking reform. It's not intended to open this back up. Again, it's really just an alignment. Similarly, landscape, it was also updated recently, not as recently as parking. So our general approach here is alignment as well, making sure that, it's all, the code is all talking to each other in the same consistent language. We will, with landscape though, do a little bit of a dive into it to make sure that we're getting the landscape in place for key site areas. So it's things like the parking lot perimeter, basically that area that abuts a street, parking lot interior, looking at the planting requirements for buffer yards and making sure that the variety of buffer yards are doing their job in buffering. And then even maybe looking for some building facade landscape for larger developments. So really we'll be looking to make sure that as we do this alignment, that these key areas are also addressed. So signs. We'll be updating the sign code as part of this. I think it's important to note that with the Supreme Court decisions over the past few years, we have to be content neutral. We cannot tell anybody what they can put on their sign. There are a few things we're still allowed to do. One is controls versus on-premise versus off-premise signs. A simple way to think about this, an on-premise sign is just the typical sign a business would put up on their property versus an off-premise sign, which is a billboard. So we still are allowed to have those two separate controls. Also commercial versus non-commercial messages. So that's still been upheld to date, just making sure that, we're accommodating what you want to say in non-commercial messages. We think there's a lot of ways to organize the sign regulations to make them a lot more easy to understand. You see here a proposed structure, the purpose of it, general standards that apply to all signs, what kind of signs are prohibited, what signs require a permit, what signs don't require a permit, but still have standards attached. And then the fantastically named currently extraordinarily significant signs, which I think is a great name. You should never change it. And it's a great thing to have. Usually we're adding these into codes and you've already got it. And it's really just talking about signs that are character giving, that you can maintain even if the business still isn't there. It's really a way, it's kind of a work of art of the city's history that's in place. And they really do add a lot of character to a city. You also, if you've ever cracked open the sign chapter, you'll see that the large majority of it are these things called special provision sign controls. They are almost mini sign codes for very specific geographic areas. And there's a lot of them. We are not changing any of these as part of our process. These are approved, they're in place, they're working within these geographic areas, so we are not proposing to change those. We want to move them to the appendix because they really overwhelm the sign chapter. They make it look like you have to do one of these in order to have signs, and we want to make it clear that we're giving you good sign regulations and you don't necessarily need to resort to special provision sign controls. So these will still exist. They just won't be featured as prominently as they are in the current sign regulations. Your current sign regulations are organized as attached versus detached signs. This really is a way that it doesn't really get at the context of what you're seeing. What we want to do is really reorganize this so signs are regulated by the specific type and then by the district. So what you see here is we're trying to get at matching the signs allowed to the district's overall form, maintaining a more consistent visual character. So you'll see in some cases, I've got some example signs down here, some may be allowed in some districts and not allowed in other districts. Or a sign may be allowed in, most of the districts. The size of that sign would change based on the scale of the district. So it's really just meant to create that alignment. As we're bringing in design, we want to make sure that the sign controls aren't working against that. So administration. We want to clarify the administrative processes. You've got 4 articles that we've proposed. Code administrators, application procedures, the actual approvals for both zoning and subdivision. And it's really just meant to show who does what, how do I do it, what happens when I'm doing it. And that's really clarifying these administrative processes. A lot of these and a lot of their kind of parameters come from the state, typical to any zoning code you see anywhere in the country. So, obviously working within that parameter. A couple of things that we have made recommendations on for variances, to remove the limits on the types of variances allowed. The point of a variance is to provide a means for an unexpected condition. And the idea of setting limits is counterintuitive to something being unexpected. I can't limit something that's unexpected. So we want to make sure that it remains kind of the tool that it was initially set up as. Still, process is the same. It still goes through that public process to get that variance. We just want to remove the types you can apply for. We've also proposed to add an administrative modification procedure. Oftentimes you'll hear these called minor variances and colloquially baby variances. And what these would be modifications that are permitted to be approved by the zoning administrator. There would be clear, in this case, there would be very clear thresholds of what can fall under this category. I've put an example up there that you kind of commonly see, a modification of 10% or less to any dimensional standard. So somebody just needs, a foot into their rear setback. That's something that could likely be approved through this process. Typically, these do have some notice around it. The neighbors, it's a lesser notice. The neighbors get a heads up that something's happening. If there's any protest to that, it would just be kicked up to a regular variance. So there are safeguards in place, but for many of these are fairly small, innocuous things that typically have something to do with something weird on the lot. And so this is just that easier process to move them through. We want to look at the triggers for site plan review. Again, this is kind of as we start to build in standards and change the districts, we want to make sure that we've got things in place here, that the right things are going to site plan review. So we want to tailor site plan review by use and or by district, by the size of developments that happen, and by alteration and expansion. So we're going to kind of look to see what the appropriate triggers for site plan review are and objectively can be applied so that everybody knows when they're kind of when they're doing something, they'd be coming in for site plan review. And then finally, subdivision. You have a fairly typical subdivision process. It's something we see in a lot of different places, but you do have this one provision, and it reads, lots must conform in width, depth, and area to the pattern already established in adjacent areas, having due regard to the character of the area. This is not a typical subdivision standard. Subdivision is really an administrative process about the division of land. The zoning district that land lives in really dictates the lot sizes for subdivision. So meeting at least those very much those minimums. This type of language is really vague and subjective and open to interpretation. What is conforming? What does that mean that it must conform? What is having due regard? These are very subjective. And this kind of subjectivity can lead to an inconsistent application of the regulations, again, within a process that is just the division of land. It provides room for bias and arbitrary decisions. There could be a risk of a legal challenge as well, and just uncertainty. If I'm meeting the standards of the district, but this is in place, again, do I really know what's going to happen if I'm following all the rules, but you've got this kind of loophole that, punishes me for not following the rules. And then finally, plan development. Oh boy, 1,200 and counting. Currently, you're really relying on PD, and it is creating a bit of an unpredictable development environment. Now, plan development on its face is not a bad zoning tool. It's something good. It really was created and intended to allow for kind of unique and innovative developments not anticipated by the code, allowing those modifications to the base standards to kind of allow for these types of developments to happen. So it's a good thing to have. But what we've seen, and you're not alone, I've seen this in other places, PDs in Dallas have changed over time. They've moved beyond this original intent of being a way to accommodate, innovative development. It's becoming a way to manage controversial uses, to fill in gaps in outdated zoning, and becoming more so the default zoning mechanism. It's working around what's not working in the code, which leads to a number of different consequences. It is a time-consuming and costly process. It says, as I said on the slide, people applying for a PD cost them time, cost them, it's an expensive process. The city staff has to spend their time kind of managing these PDs. And for somebody, who's got one going in next door to them, your life's going to be taken up for a few months, kind of following the PD process, which, leaves everything open up for, modification. So for everybody, it's really, kind of taking a lot of time here. Because it can modify things, it can lead to uncertain outcomes, which can be frustrating and inefficient. It's really trying to figure out, exactly what is this PD going to be by the end of the process. And I think one of the most important things here is they make enforcement of the code complex. Plan developments, in essence, function as mini zoning codes, and each one of them has their own little unique thing to it. And so when you think something is in violation of a general zoning standard, and you call somebody to say, hey, they're violating the code, they may go into the PD once they finally figure out there's a PD there and figure out that it is actually allowed. But you can't do that until you identify it's in a PD, and then you find that PD, and then you find the rules of that PD. So we want to kind of work towards a code that's much easier to enforce across the city. I do want to say one thing about all these PDs. They are vested. We cannot touch them. So we're not proposing to take away any PDs. This is to make this very clear. They exist now. They're going to continue to exist. So that's really what that just to be clear on that, because they are vested rights in terms of development options. So how can we solve this? I think if you've kind of, as you've heard throughout this presentation, creating a new district structure, looking into a new use structure, that's really something that's going to reduce the reliance. If you've got all the right tools in place, you're not going to need to turn to PD if you don't need to. If there's conditions and standards that have always been applied to a PD as it comes through, to make sure we take those and turn those into conditions on the code for any of those uses that pop up. If they're common, that means that they're desired. And so we want to make sure that we're building them into the use structure. And then things like administrative flexibility. So rather than a PD being a bundle of variances, some options on how to deal with some, distinct things on the site through things like the administrative modifications procedure and the variance process. So making sure that we've got all these tools going on within the code. We've also made the suggestion that perhaps rather than treating plan development as a district, that we treat it as an approval procedure, that it's an approval that lays on top of a base district. The process for approving it and everything would all remain the same. It's just kind of how it lies on the ground. So essentially you would take your district, whatever district you were in, say it's a C1, commercial district 1, made up name, and then you want to apply for a PD over that. You would work with what's in commercial district 1, and then the PD would modify what needs to be modified, which again, fairly typical to what is going on right now. But as an approval, we can add an expiration to it, which means if I've gotten approval for a plan development and I haven't acted on it within a set amount of time, that PD just goes away and that district stays as it is, as that base district. So this is really more of kind of a cleanup streamline of how the PD process works, in order to kind of make sure that we're using it to the best of its ability. And then finally, nonconformities. So you kind of heard us talk about this probably in the most detail within the single family issues of nonconformity. We want to make sure that we're addressing the different aspects of nonconformity, but we really are trying to eliminate as many nonconformities as we can where appropriate, but some are going to be there. And so we need to make sure that the rules are clear for each and every type of nonconformity that's out there. So you can take a look at something like, making sure we have the rules in place for non-conforming uses, non-conforming structures, non-conforming lots, and non-conforming signs. And we also wanted to add in a new one that we've been drafting, and it's been in more and more recent codes, a non-conforming site characteristic. So if we have standards for exterior lighting or for the way a parking lot needs to be designed, we don't need to take the whole structure and make it non-conforming. We can deal with that specific site characteristic. And so that really is what we want to do is ensure that we're addressing those specific types of site characteristics. And then finally, I've been hearing some feedback on this one too as well over the past few weeks of these meetings, is the potential new permission for within single family and duplex areas for existing homes. And really what this potential permission is really looking at, I have an existing single family home. One of my sidewall or my rear wall is a little bit too far into my setback, but on this existing home, as of the date the code goes into effect, I want to do some improvements. Say I want to do a second floor, or I want to expand towards the back of my lot. This provision would allow you to do that expansion in line with the existing wall. So as you can see in these illustrations, you would go up, but you would be in line with that already existing rear wall that you've got. That way you don't have to get a variance, and you don't have to set the wall back if that's what you were trying to avoid. That can be costly, and it can look a little odd. The point here is to provide options for existing homes, single family homes in particular, for them to make improvements to extend their life, to extend their viability, to provide that little bit of extra space that'll keep that home going another 40 years. Nothing else can be violated within this. Does not give you any permissions to violate anything such as the minimum height of the district or the maximum height of the district, the maximum building coverage, the maximum impervious surface, any of the other setbacks, none of that. You have to meet the district requirements. So you can't, this is really just meant to look at that wall that, was built long ago and is a little bit too far into either the rear or the side. And we've seen this in a lot of other codes. It's been useful. It maintains that housing stock, that existing housing stock, that gives character, provides a way to extend the life of a home. It's a greener way, because essentially the greenest home is typically the one that's already built. So we're really just kind of we're providing a little bit of flexibility here. But again, you can't build taller than the district allows. You can't cover more land than the district allows. It's all got to match up with all the rest of the district requirements. And so with that, that comes to the end of the presentation. Again, we really thank you for coming this evening to hear this. Want to just be kind of really clear, this is the website, DallasZoningReform.com. We really do encourage you to provide written comments on anything you've heard, both good and bad. There is a comment form on there. You can also just send an email. You can mail things to the planning department, but we really do need those written comments. So we're going to kind of close out the presentation part of this presentation and jump into the Q&A. As I said before, we want to start with the raised hands. I believe Mitch from Camiros' office will be running that. He'll call on you as he sees the hands come up. They kind of line up within the chat as we see them on our end. Allow you to give your question or comment, and we'll go through that. If there is a little bit of time left at the end, we do need to close out around, quarter to the hour. If there is an ability, if that we see we've got some time, we could do some questions in the chat. We will ask you to, even if you've entered a question, to re-enter it at that point, because kind of going back through the chat, we're not going to be able to see it. And so with that, I am going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn on my video because I'm the one talking. And again, happy to have you here. So if anybody would like to, I'm going to turn it over to
Okay.
the folks on my team to kind of start to run this part of it.
Sure thing. So like Arista said, if you have any questions or comments, make sure you raise your hand and then I'll grant you the ability to talk and I'll call out your name so you know who is up. So right now we only have one hand raised. That's going to be Donald Turner. And uh, Donald, you just need to unmute and then you can say whatever it is you need to say.
I have the question in the chat. Would it be possible to construct a tall observation wheel at 2001 North Griffin Street in downtown Dallas with a design similar to the Texas Odyssey wheel that was planned for the Cedars area in 2018? Could such a wheel be built at 1100 North McKinney Street, which is next door? Could it be about 850 feet tall, which would make it the tallest in the world, considering that the Ain Dubai, which is in Dubai, is already 820 feet tall?
Honestly, I don't have an answer to that. That is a very specific question, a very intriguing question. Um, I don't know. You know, we don't have any specific district standards. We would kind of need to know what this is, what these districts are. It's intriguing. It's an intriguing question just on its face. I just cannot answer the question. I don't know.
Okay. Again, raise your hand if you have any questions. If you have more than one, you can raise it more than once, but for right now, we're just gonna sit here for a second and see if anybody else raises their hand. All right, we have, apologies if I mispronounce any names, Maura Schreier-Fleming. Schreier?
Hi, thank you. It's Maura Schreier Fleming. Thank you so much for the presentation. Very fascinating. And my question is, you mentioned that the city districts are so different. So, did I understand correctly that ADUs or your proposal for ADUs is that they would be allowed in every district? Because as you say, if every district is so if the districts are so different, why wouldn't you make it specific about ADUs? And then my second question is, where do short-term rentals fit into all this? Thank you so much.
I'm gonna start with the easy one. Short-term rentals aren't allowed and not part of our scope to address. So, kind of a bigger city issue. Typically, short-term rentals often are handled outside of zoning. It's oftentimes more appropriate. So we have nothing to do with short-term rental. And my understanding right now is that they're not permitted. Regarding the ADUs, the proposal we've put out would be to kind of more broadly allow ADUs again throughout a variety of the residential districts. Um, with the districts being different, as you allow, if we were to allow ADUs, and I'm not saying we are, but if we were to allow ADUs, there would be standards built around them, and those standards can be tailored within the ADU standards to the types of lots that they would be going on. So, you know, when you create standards for something, it's not necessarily that there's just one set of standards that's out there and it works everywhere and for everybody. What we really want to do is make sure we've got enough flexibility in there to make sure that you know, we're fitting within the context. If we were to allow it, it's a proposal on the table. I want to be very clear about that.
Okay, thank you for the question. We have another one here from Donald. Go ahead, Donald.
What at the site proposed, that is between the Dallas World Aquarium and the Perot Museum. So I'm wondering if such a tall Ferris wheel could be constructed there, similar to the Eye in London or the High Roller in Las Vegas, but this one would be the tallest in the world.
Um, yeah, I mean, that would, we really don't have enough information to answer anything along those lines at this point. I don't have any kind of ideas of what the district permissions are in particular. Quite frankly, I don't have the map in front of me. I can't see even the district that it would currently be in. So yeah, unfortunately, we don't have an answer.
Okay, thank you for the question, Donald. Next, we have Matt Boss. Matt, go ahead.
Hi, what was the reasoning for choosing 3,000 as the lot size minimum for the new proposed R3 district? I know a lot of cities have looked into something much smaller for constructing smaller starter homes.
So as we were looking at it, you're kind of your lowest right now is about 5,000 square feet. And so we thought kind of a reasonable one to go kind of below that would be 3,000 square feet. And again, part of the reasoning for that is noted in the presentation when we did the analysis, and I say we, but this is really Mitch to give credit where credit is due, looked at it. You've got a lot of these smaller lots already in 3,000. So it was a smaller lot development pattern that was already present within Dallas. We've been receiving some comments on both sides, some saying maybe to even go lower than that. We understand that there's other cities out there that can go even as low as 15,000 for a single family development. We've seen that kind of thing going on. We've written some codes that do go to that level. We're looking for feedback. We had to work with kind of what we've been seeing, but if you would like to provide us some feedback on if there's a need for even a smaller lot development than 3,000, happy to take those comments.
Okay, thank you for the question, Matt. We don't have any other raised hands right now, so give it another second. Okay, we have another raised hand from Donald. We'll give it another minute to see if anybody who hasn't asked a question has any questions or comments. And then we'll get to you in a second, Donald. Okay. Donald, you're free to ask your question.
I actually participated in form-based code for Arlington back in 20 back this spring in for Dr. Dadeen Rukmana's class. So, are you thinking about doing form-based code anywhere in Dallas?
We are the proposal that we had right now that we were looking at is kind of integrate what we would call a hybrid code, where we integrate kind of the good things about form-based coding into all of the districts Dallas currently has. This kind of set of form-based districts that sits a little bit kind of off to the side. They're a little bit different way that they function. And so as we look at this code and we look at things that are coming in, we'll see maybe some districts have a bit more of a form-based orientation than others. So we want to just basically bring that through and combine all the zoning techniques that are at our disposal to address the various issues that are happening within the city of Dallas.
Okay, seeing no more raised hands, we're gonna go to the chat here. We have a question from Beth. Why are conservation districts not grouped with historic districts and NSOs overlays?
Kind of simply, special purpose districts are base districts. So essentially they're the district itself that lies on the map. And obviously I'm probably, I, I, it's kind of obvious, but the overlay district lies on top of a base district. Historic and NSO are overlay districts. CD, while it may seem like it's an overlay, it really is an actual proper base district. So, I know it's working the way it's structured, works with what was originally underneath it as a zoning district, but it really is its own base district on the map. So it's not technically an overlay. That's why they're grouped separately. And if there's ways that, if you have any suggestions for how you would like to group together the special purpose and the overlays, happy to hear those. But really, we were just being very specific to the function of the district.
Okay, I think that covers all the questions that were in the chat. If somebody would like to ask another question in the chat itself, rather than raising their hand and speaking, feel free to do so now. You can also raise your hand and speak if you wish.
Okay, I think Mitch,
Right.
Donald Turner has one more.
Okay, Donald. Donald, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Could there be incentives provided to have an observation deck open to the public on top of the Bank of America Plaza, which is the tallest building in Dallas, as part of what the developers are planning to do with the building?
From our perspective, in the reform of the zoning code, we don't have any input on that. That would be something they would have to, private developers would work with the city on that. That's nothing that we would actually control.
Okay, I don't think we have any more questions. If somebody else does have a question or comment, like we've said, feel free to head to the project website, DallasZoningReform.com, where you can leave comments or ask questions there. We can get back in touch with you. Marissa, do you have anything else sort of take us out here?
No, you stole my thunder there. I'm just trying to encourage folks to go to the website. You will see all kinds of materials posted there, and opportunities for you to provide comments and to send things via email. Again, we really appreciate everybody's time this evening. We're going to be looking forward to seeing the written comments as they come in as well. So thank you all. Really appreciate it. And everybody have a good night. You got a little bit of your time back this evening. Okay. Thank you all.